This episode is brought to you by Paramount Plus. If you don't already subscribe to Paramount Plus, please use our affiliate link by going to talkthroughmedia.com/Paramount Plus. Using our affiliate link gives us a little credit, which helps us to keep bringing you great content. U.S. residents only.
Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Talk Through. I'm Brian.
And I'm Kim.
And I'm LT.
Hey, Kim's back.
Hey, I never went anywhere. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm always right here in this dark booth.
That's right. James has been building you a booth. Is that the booth? Or
I am in the booth.
You're in the booth.
Yes, he even made a door. So now I am fully enclosed, and it's very dark, and it gets very warm in here as well. So his next plan is to add some ventilation so that I don't die in here.
Well, that's very cool. And
well, it will be eventually.
Yeah, it's not very cool.
Yeah,
right
not very cool. Yeah. But that's been kind of a thing that I've struggled with. Like right now, unfortunately, our AC is going, but at least I know how to take that sound out. So,
yeah.
All right. We will be covering the penultimate episode of season 1. That's episode 9, titled "All Those Who Wander." Before we get started, we want to remind you that we now provide early access to a virtually uncensored / lightly edited version of the podcast that goes out at this point right now. The main podcast is, I hate to say it, but it's several weeks behind, and the Patreon is actually on time. So I was able to catch up on the Patreon episodes this week. So anyway, if you want to get hold of the episodes ahead of just about everybody else, go to patreon.com/Star Trek TTM to sign up, and just as little as $1 a month will get you access. And basically all of that money goes to running the website and the podcasts and everything else. Patreon.com/Star Trek TTM to sign up. So before we go into this episode, we have feedback for season 1. It's episode 8, titled "The Elysian Kingdom." So let's open hailing frequencies. All right, we got some feedback from season 1, episode 6, from Brian from Colorado. LT, you want to read that one?
Okay. Brian says, I just listened to the podcast recording and want to clarify my no about Pike's reaction to the Omela Society being unenlightened. I'm not looking at Pike's behavior from our current society's point of view, and certainly not from some sense of absolute morality, which doesn't really exist, but rather from the perspective of future Federation, which puts diversity above all else, i.e. etic, and has the Prime Directive as its most important rule. Being accepting of the values of other cultures, even if they differ from your own, is central to the Federation mindset and is what an enlightened viewpoint in that society means. Thus, for Pike to instead interject his own personal morality into his reactions and be blind to the perspective of the other culture was not an enlightened perspective for him. He was displaying a more provincial way of thinking constrained to his own values. I think this would have been a better Star Trek episode if Pike had struck by the Prime Directive and trusted that the system this society has, while offensive to him personally, wasn't his business to criticize or try to stop. If the Omelas had been Federation members, that would completely change things, but given their status as non-members, I didn't think Pike represented the Federation stance well. The Federation morality and the Omelas morality are different, and that's okay, as uncomfortable as it may be for some.
Yeah, I mean, my thought on that was that Pike was kind of reacting because it was a child, and perhaps the rules don't apply as much if it's a child. That's just my take on it, but he wasn't following the stance. I can agree with him on that.
And I'm gonna stick to my guns on that. I think that maybe tact wise he could have done a little different, but I don't think he was that far off board for that.
All right. Well, I think at this point we can get on with the episode in hand. Season 1, episode 9, titled All Those Who Wander, written by co-executive producer Davey Perez and directed by Christopher J. Byrne, who has directed several episodes of the Star Trek series in recent years. I don't know if he's done Picard. I'd have to do an IMDb to look him up, but I know he's done Discovery. The description from ParamountPlus.com is as follows. The USS Enterprise crew comes face to face with their demons, and scary monsters too, when their landing party is stranded on a barren planet with a ravenous enemy. If any time needed the shock horror, it's that time.
It's always time for shock horror.
It's always time for shock horror, yes. Stardate is 2510.6. It was, and we haven't been saying this, but I noticed it and I thought it was appropriate for this particular episode because I was surprised. But it could have been more gory. It was rated TV-14 with violence. So I think that was my take on it when I rewatched it again today. It could have been gorier than it was. The air date was June 30th, 2022. The runtime was 52 minutes and 43 seconds. All right. Kim, we'll start with you. What did you think of All Those Who Wander?
All right. I liked it. I thought it was a pretty exciting episode, probably my top 2 of the season, and I give it 9.2 out of 10 hot Spocks.
Didn't you give a hot Spock before?
Maybe. I intend to give hot Spocks from here on out for this show.
All right, LT.
Well, I really like this one. I gave it a 9.9 out of 10. Game over, man. Game over.
Yep. And I'm right there with you. This is right up there with my favorite episode of the season. It's this one and Memento Mori, I think, are my 2 favorites, which are both Gorn episodes. And I don't remember what I gave a Memento Mori, but it should be a 9.9, I think. So I'm going to give it a 9.9 out of 10. That's not how linguistics works. That's what Lon said to Uhura. And she's like, that's not how linguistics works.
You know, they keep doing that. They keep telling her to do something that they think is how linguistics works. And she's like, that's not how it works. But then she figures it out and she makes it work anyway. So she's not helping her own cause.
Yeah. She read his body language, I guess. Okay, so we got listener ratings. Kim, we'll start with you. You can read Rick's rating.
Okay, Rick from Cleveland says, I rate this episode 10, yet another human drinking games out of 10. This episode was incredible. I loved almost everything about it and truly did not see some of the twists coming.
Cool. Next up, Wes from Minnesota, who says, I give this episode 8 Gorn babies bursting out of 10.
And then lastly, Brian from Colorado says, I like this episode mostly, but the Gorn were such a big no. I have to give it 7.5 out of 10 alien acid babies. Alien acid babies?
It's a good description.
Okay, so this is where we normally play.
Yes!
However,
the hardworking clip cutters here at Talk Through Media have come up with new bumpers.
So as an alternate, yes, we have this for more. Instead of, we were thinking about Hit It, but I found this instead.
Now we're talking.
That was from Memento Mori. So I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
That's not bad. It doesn't have quite the same drama as the Yes.
Yeah.
It's true.
Well, we will continue looking. All right. So, Kim, why don't you take the first one? It's Rick again.
Rick from Cleveland says yes for La'an and Chapel, who each had a little bit of Ripley from the Alien franchise come through this week. A huge yes for Hemmer, who is just perfect. His calm way of facing death and even in that moment helping Uhura to figure out her purpose was just wonderful. I cried even on second viewing, knowing what was coming. Yes for Spock and dropping his control to tap into not his human emotions, but his repressed Vulcan emotions to show just why Vulcans control their emotions. His scenes were quite intense. Even before he let his anger out, we saw an actual look of terror on his face during the Gorn attack.
Yes, I saw that too, actually.
Okay. Well, I guess next up's Brian from Colorado. And Brian says, Uhura's log in the beginning and struggle with finding her place was a nice arc in this episode, and indeed the whole season overall. I really enjoyed the end scene with her on the bridge looking at the comms console, too. The party in Pike's quarters was good, and I smiled seeing Spock wash dishes. The 246810 code Pike used on the bridge was funny, reminding me of the code on Spaceballs, as was M'Benga's remark about it. I thought everything about how this episode was filmed on the planet was very cinematic. It really felt like a movie and was well done.
I would agree with that.
Yep. Even though it was sad, Hemmer's handling of his death was well done. I liked how he imparted some final words of wisdom for Uhura as a mentor figure for her. I was very impressed by Chapel's acting in the funeral scene and when she met up with Spock in the hallway to confront him about his emotions. Their embrace was very rewarding to see.
Was the 246810 thing, was that really funny? I mean, working for a security company, it made me cringe. I was like, oh, is that really a good idea?
There is a long-standing history of Star Trek with bad passwords.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like I think Kirk's security code was something like 00000.
Oh my God.
Something like that. I don't know. And then of course, there were a bunch of crazy ones, crazily dumb ones. I mean, in Next Gen, they should do a better job with that. Well, I think now they do. Now they do when they show it, but before, I don't think they understood encryption very well.
Well, and in the 90s, it was all voice print. And, we recognize now that that's not enough. And so the voice print just seems so insecure and they're all saying their PIN numbers out loud. And that just seems absolutely crazy at this point.
Or retinal scan. That's another one that they used to do a lot.
Yep.
Another opportunity to pop someone's eyeball out.
That's what I was thinking.
And
more eye stuff.
And I'm sorry, I hate voice prints. I hate anything to do with voice because mine never works.
Well, LT, you are aware you're on a podcast, right?
It's true. I am. But I'm just saying, Microsoft voice engine hates me.
Oh, no.
And that once upon a time when we had when all the voice activated commands were such a big thing when I was still in software world, I found out that the only way it really understood me was using expletives. and loudly delivered ones.
Nice.
That's funny. All right. That's it for our listener yeses. What do you have for yeses, Kim?
I like Pike in an apron, and I also liked Hot Spock doing the dishes. It was just something funny about both of those things. It seemed almost out of place, but on this show, it seemed very in place because we've been doing that so much, right? That's Pike's big thing is the cooking.
Well, the best one was the look on Spock's face when he hung the apron on him.
He's like, okay. I liked Spock's line about there being no limit to human drinking games because that's completely true. Really, the overall tone and atmosphere of the episode was very cool, and I really enjoyed it. They managed to make it a thriller and not like a horror episode, and I really appreciated that. The message from Hemmer to Uhura about creating bonds is a gift. I thought that was such a great line. And at the same time, when that was happening, there were people peering through the window trying to talk him out of sacrificing himself. And to me, it had a very much Wrath of Khan vibe at the end, where Kirk was yelling at Spock, not to do it. And I just liked that moment. I thought that was pretty good. And I think that was it, except for a hot Spock. I can't say it enough how much I like Spock. This version of Spock is just great. And I think he's so consistent and so strong and very charismatic. And I just like his take on the character.
To react to what you were saying there, it's like what I said with the TV-14. Like, they could have turned the violence and the gore up a notch, and it could have been like watching, Alien or, whatever. And we saw a little bit of that, right? But it was coming out of this alien that we've never seen before. And it was very up close. So you couldn't really see where it was coming from, or there wasn't anything like really gory in it.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of balancing the, tightrope very well, because they could have basically taken it a lot farther than they did.
They could have. I don't really like scary movies, and I don't really get into gore. And this, if they had taken it up another notch, I feel like I wouldn't have enjoyed it. I probably wouldn't have watched it. I mean, I would have watched it, but I wouldn't have been looking at the screen the whole time. I would have done something else on my iPad or whatever, because I don't like that. But I thought they just had a perfect balance, at least for my sensibilities. I thought it worked really well.
I think it was an appropriate Star Trek level of gore.
There you go.
Yeah. And you have a similar reaction to Ruthie, who I talked to about it. And she didn't like this episode because she doesn't like horror, which I'm like, well, you did like Walking Dead. So, what's up with that? But anyway, not her cup of tea, I guess. But we were talking, I guess we were all talking about it in the hosts. It wasn't just me and her, but anyway, this episode is not everyone's cup of tea, but for me, I loved it. And I think canon aside, but we'll get to that in a bit. All right. LT, what have you got?
And just to finish the thought, Kim, I'm not a big fan of gory movies. Now, if it's scary movies, it's one thing, but if it's just, a viscera fest, I'm not a super huge fan of that. What I will say is that this to me was probably the perfect mix for Star Trek doing what was, avant-garde and shocking in the 70s, going into the whole jump scary, frightening body horror alien thing. That I guess I was thinking about it in the context of being, my age, that I was in my early teens in the 70s when we had the big explosion of science fiction stuff come out, when we had Star Trek, the motion picture, and Star Wars and Alien and a bunch of, just a bunch of science fiction shows on television. That Alien sort of changed the strange alien creature genre, because before, you had monsters and you had strange aliens, but it was never quite like this. It was never, an egg down your throat. So the creature like feasted on you like a parasite. So I think they did a good job with it. I mean, even though people will go, oh, it's a knockoff of the Alien franchise. Well, maybe so. But how many other movies were a knockoff of the Alien franchise in the same sort of way? They explored a little bit of the slight jump scare, the fact that they went into that predator infrared vision when the little Gorn babies were peeking at the crew. So I would say they took some cues from some other shows in the genre, but I think they did a pretty good job of making it their own. It reminded me of Alien and Aliens, but it also reminded me of John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah, it's very, very astute of you because according to Memory Alpha, there was an article where in inverse.com, they interviewed the writer of this episode. And he said that he was influenced by Alien, Predator, The Thing, and Gremlins, which I guess I can understand with Gremlins since they were small, or at least they started out small.
Right.
And they were kind of asserting dominance over each other, or at least the bad ones were.
And they had a thing that they didn't like. It wasn't cold when it was the Gremlins, but water.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, anyway.
Well, and especially with The Thing, you had the strange, creepy alien, and you're also on an Arctic base. So it sort of segues in with the fabulous Class L, it feels like Andoria planet. I was kind of excited to see, we got a new alien. We don't know who he is. We don't know where they're from, but we got a new alien.
I agree with that. And that Buckley, as she called him, was, a human, like a human actor with puppetry on top of him. So Carlos Albornoz as Buckley. So he's the one who played Buckley. And of course he had not animatronics, but puppetry on his costume. So, like the wings or whatever that were on his head were moving. I don't know if they were wings or ears, but they kind of look like wings. Yeah. So anyway, I thought that he was very cool.
And that's what you can do with bipedal aliens when you have the budget to make them more than appliances.
Yeah, I think they're doing a really good job of mixing CGI with practical effects in this on this show. I like how they're doing a lot of it with practical effects because I think when you do everything digitally, it just doesn't look right.
Yep.
You
can still tell no matter how good it is.
Yeah.
That's why most of the zombies that we see on The Walking Dead are, old school makeup, but
they're PE.
Right. They're not, the only time they'll use them is if they're like doing far away zombies that are, layered. But aside from that.
And every time anybody mentions CGI for up close, I'll always say Henry Cavill's lip. Henry Cavill in the Justice League movie, he famously could not shave his mustache for another contractual obligation, so they CGI'd it out. And his lip looked weird.
I bet.
But anyways, we've gotten through Buckley there. I listed it as a yes, and I realize that there are some people who listed it as a no or not good enough, but I'm going to stand my ground on this one. The fact that they obviously brought back the red shirt ensign trope for Star Trek.
Yeah, although they cut it and they divided it sort of, so it was ensign, but they had a lieutenant, and they had a cadet.
Yeah, but it was Lieutenant JG. So one up and one down, it all evens out.
Exactly.
Averaged out.
That's exactly my point. Is that, Yes. So ensign expendables.
Yep. And it's mainly because we've been through 8 episodes so far, and nobody really died.
Well, we have seen.
Yeah, but
there have been some.
Yeah, but this was like classic away team die.
Right. Yes. We hadn't seen that.
Yep.
We hadn't seen, the one thing I'm thinking of was the episode, I think it was Memento Mori, although I'm not 100% sure of that. It was when the bulkhead came down and Kyle got through and the guy behind him didn't.
Yep.
All right.
But we only got like 15 or 20 seconds of hurry up, come on.
Yeah.
And then we never talked about that poor person again.
Nope.
At least here we acknowledged that they died at the end.
They got a picture and a flag at least.
That's right.
So more yeses for me. I really like the fact that Chapel got to be an action hero again.
Yes.
She got to get her Ripley on. I really liked the scene in the corridor, where she gave Spock the hug, because we keep going, oh, those two. But
I had this as well.
I think he was legitimately having a moment of crisis with himself. And sometimes having somebody who cares about you take you aside is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, and, this may explain Spock in later years kind of like being less open to emotion.
Yep.
Because at this point, he seems more open to it than he was by the time, first season comes.
And I like the fact that they're showing him struggle with it.
Right.
Because they sort of gave it lip service in TOS, and you saw it develop more through the movies. But this, to me, is adding a little more meat to that bone for the character.
It's also worth saying, I wanted to mention this. Spock and Muck, I had said that, I gave it a 9.5, and I kept saying it's because I was watching it on a phone and low bandwidth and all this stuff. And when I would be back in Oklahoma, I'd make it a point to watch it again and see if my rating went up. Well, it did. So I now would give it a 9.7 out of 10. So still not my favorite of the season, but it's certainly gone up there in my rating. So it was a 9.5 before.
Being able to see it on a big screen helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think my last yes is going to be Hemmer. Now, while I had some reservations about his character in the very beginning of the series, my only complaint now is that at this point, we didn't quite give him enough screen time now that I have come to like his character so much. I like the fact that he, got a chance to give that last little talk to Uhura, but after they've had their bonding moments, I like the way that he, performed through the episode. And I might complain about the fact that he sacrificed himself. That was well within what I would say is his character, that he was doing what he thought was best to save everyone else. And I'm hoping that while we may not get Hammer back, I'm hoping that the actor will be our Strange New World Jeffrey Combs. I hope they give him more work.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea. I would love to see him turn up as all kinds of different aliens.
Well, considering that we had Kenneth Mitchell playing just about every main Klingon for the first and second season. We've had actors that have played multiple roles, so it's well within their wheelhouse, and I hope they take him up on it.
Yeah, I think they will. Yeah. So getting into mine, just piggybacking on what you just said, the Uhura Hemmer moments in this episode really kind of like, if he hadn't already made his mark on her, he definitely did this episode with, some really wise things to say, the basically she's like steering away from friendship and getting close to people when it's obvious that she loves making friends and she's good at it and she has a wonderful way to communicate with people that people respond to, aliens respond to. So she has a gift and she needs to stop running away from that gift. She needs to, we know what she's going to do, but my point being that I didn't realize at the start of this season how much she was going to rely on another character to, turn her into the person that we know. And that was Hemmer. This wasn't an aliens versus predator, but it was an alien and predator with a little Jurassic Park mixed in for good measure. That's how I took this episode. I thought that it had, like, what reminded me of Alien were the babies, like, coming right out of them. Obviously, that's very alien-like. Predator, the like noises they would make, and the white that we would see when they would be pursuing one of our people. Like, I know they did that with Nurse Chapel, and I think they did it with Spock
and Uhura.
They did it right before they ate Duke.
Right? Yes, they did. So I liked that. I mean, I don't have a problem with them, borrowing or paying homage to something we've seen before. So I loved Buckley like you did, and I loved how the Gorn, or the little Gorn, were puppets. So it wasn't CGI. It was puppets. And if you watch the Ready Room, you can actually see them show that they're puppets. So I thought that was very cool.
And floating out there on Instagram was a picture of Himmer with one of the little Gorn puppets on his shoulder. And the little caption said, "Proud Papa."
Oh my.
I also enjoyed Spock and his emotions, and him struggling with that. I think that that both makes him human, and it's good to see him struggling with that to become the person that he eventually becomes, because you could clearly see that he had trouble, kind of like he got the rage going because he needed to, but then it was obvious that he had trouble dialing it back. And like I think most of us would, but in the case of Spock, half Vulcan, trained Vulcan, you would expect him to be able to get that back under control, and clearly he is still struggling with it. So some PTSD, I would say, and for good reason. This may come as a surprise to people for me to say, Sam Kirk, and let's face it, Sam Kirk was just kind of annoying this episode, but Sam Kirk reminded me of something, and I'm going to talk about that later in our notes, but I don't think now is the time to bring it up. So I will wait until later on.
Right. And I'll go ahead and just say it again. Obviously, Sam is the emotional brother.
Your point about bringing up the, what was that character in Aliens?
Hudson.
Yeah. Him being the Hudson of this show, I think is very appropriate.
Yep.
Game over, man.
What are we going to do, man? What are we going to do?
The Spock Chapel moment at the end, I thought was very touching, and I loved that. And I'll just say, I would want to serve under Pike for no other reason than just to have him serve me his food. Beyond all other things, that's like one good reason right there, is just to get some
omelets and waffles, man.
Yeah, because let's face it, he can cook. It's funny how we've had a couple of captains now, Cisco and now Pike, who are excellent chefs. Okay, so let's move on and go to our nose.
No!
All right, and we have, like we did for the other one, we have another perspective sound effect for the nose, also from Memento Mori.
Oh no.
That is when Pike realizes that they're about to be attacked and the shields are down. So he says that. So we're still working on it. We'll see. We got one more for not good enough. So, all right. Kim, you want to read Brian from Colorado?
Yes. Brian from Colorado says, I have two no's. The main one is the Gorn. What we saw in this episode was not the Gorn, but rather a sinister dinosaur-like alien species, very derivative of Aliens, Predator, and Jurassic Park all rolled together. It was very well crafted and executed in the genre of alien horror films, but it didn't feel very Star Trek. More importantly, these creatures are not bipedal and seem nothing at all like the Gorn introduced in Arena, and then established more definitely in A Mirror Darkly. I haven't seen a single interview with those involved in the production even mention In a Mirror Darkly, so I have to question whether they did their homework about the Gorn. Now, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe Gorn babies grew up to be more like the Gorn we've seen depicted on the screen before, but it sure doesn't seem that way. If only they'd given this species another name besides Gorn, we wouldn't have this canon violation. There was no need to reinvent an existing species so dramatically. Why not just create a new one instead? I feel like you're stuck in the canon black hole no matter what. If you create a new alien that we never see again, that is so brutal and so dangerous, then you get beat up for that. So I'm not sure that you can really win the battle of canon.
Well, a lot of it depends on your perspective, because there are some things that we've had come through that were in that, to use my old favorite machinist term, in that little area of slop tolerance. But I mean, if you want to be kind of a hardcore fundamentalist on canon, then yeah, but I try to look at it as let's be a little open-minded.
Well, if you want to be really hardcore, then we never saw Gorn babies on Star Trek before.
Right.
So this is new.
Right.
And humans crawl on arms and legs when they're first born too. So they can still turn into a species that walks on two legs.
Yeah, that's my take on it as well, actually, is that we've not seen Gorn babies, and we've not seen Gorn adolescents, and that's what we saw here, so that there's nothing that, like I watched Arena today in its entirety to plan for us talking about it today. And, yes, it's very different. And yes, there are some canon things that I think you can talk about in that, specific to Spock doesn't seem to know who they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that episode. That I would take more contention over the actual Gorn themselves. Do I want a 1966 Gorn or 1967 Gorn?
No.
The way that they were, you got this guy who can't move, so he's swinging his arms so slowly. I don't want to see that. And it looked that way for a reason. Now, I don't remember what the Gorn looked like in A Mirror Darkly. I would admit that to you. What
they looked a little more, I want to say T-Rexy, Velociraptor-y maybe. They had a much more, I want to say a much more dinosaurate sort of head that I recall, as opposed to this is more alligator crocodilian.
Then I would say that what we're seeing here is not all that against, because what we're seeing here is like the last Gorn that we see was like a velociraptor, I thought.
And just to throw it out there, this is my point that I'm going to editorialize at the notes section. So I'm gonna put some mileage on our Gorn biology theories. I have thoughts.
Okay.
Even though I was the guy who took chemistry and physics and didn't like biology, I still know enough to make a good effort at it.
Well, if you want to go into it now, we can go into it now.
Nope, because this is no's.
Oh, so you're in the not good enough.
No, it's at the end, because
it's at the end.
It is neither an objection nor a
Oh, it's much like the stuff that I've got to say.
Correct, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, what do we got left here?
For Brian,
Yeah.
his second no is much more minor, but I didn't understand the scene where Spock let out his rage. What was that all about? Clearly, it had lasting effects because he later punched the wall in the hallway at the end of the episode before Chapel found him. I agree. I think I have that in my not good enoughs. I didn't quite follow what that was all about until my second time watching it. And I was like, okay, I guess I kind of get that. But I also, I don't know, that didn't really work for me.
Well, it did work for me. And I think part of it is something that I'll cover in our notes section because it's related.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Kim, what do you have for notes? Or sorry, your nose.
My first one is very personal to me, but there were a lot of flashing lights in this episode, and flashing lights give me migraines. And so I kept having to not look at the screen, and I always find that really annoying. That happened a lot also in Star Trek The Motion Picture, which we watched a couple of months ago. There's so many flashing lights, and I have to look away from the screen. But that's very specific, I think, to people who have their migraines triggered by that, but that really irritated me. I did think the baby Gorns, when they were popping out of, what was his name, Buckley, that it was a little bit too much like Alien. It didn't really bother me. I just thought, or didn't really, bother me so much that I was going to mark the episode off for it, but I didn't like it. I thought it was too much like Aliens. The baby Gorn pulling Lieutenant Duke down the hallway, to kill him. I couldn't figure out how something that tiny would be able to pull him so easily and so quickly. Almost the physics of it.
There were two of them.
Well, see, I couldn't look at the screen because of the flashing lights. So that, I don't know. That wasn't working for me. But okay, even if there's two of them, they're still so tiny. I'm not sure how they're able to pull him away so quickly. The whininess of Kirk, I always don't like that character. I didn't like that guy in Aliens either. Too much whining. And I think my main no is that I'm really bummed to lose Hemmer. I have kind of been struggling with this show to really connect with it. And I finally kind of decided, Hemmer, that's the character I like. And then they killed him. So that was a no for me.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It is a big loss, I would say. All right. LT, what about you?
And just to sidebar it in there, it's funny because for me, this has been like finding a pair of old shoes that are broken in that I've just fallen right into it, and I feel comfy and happy in my Strange New Worlds place. I guess it's just a matter of this sort of hit me where I needed to be hit, I guess.
Yeah, and I've heard that too from a few other people who've told me the same thing, that they feel comfortable with this show, that it's reminding them of the thing that they loved about Star Trek. And so, I get that.
Okay, well, for me, if you want to start on my nose, I was like, too many main crew losses in one episode. Even though I was saying, yay, we have red shirts again. It's like, boo, how many people are going to get whacked this episode? Because I could sort of go with the semi-expendable characters. And for those of you that listen to us on The Walking Dead, we have something we've jokingly referred to as the T-Dog syndrome, that whenever anybody gets a lot of screen time and we start getting a little bit of personality, they're going to die. So as soon as they started being all chummy with Duke and with that other cadet, I said, oh no.
Yeah.
Because, Uhura's got some plot armor, but everybody else is kind of going, well, this could be bad. And just so far in this run, we haven't had I don't think we've had a 3-body name character death series. So,
well, plus we also lost Lon. Whether it's permanently or for a while,
and that counts.
Lost her.
And that counts as well.
Yeah.
And I'm going to gripe about her and not good enough. But when we were going on about what to do about the ship, This was kind of my no from just a real life experience, tactical kind of perspective. If you know there are bugs on the ship and your biggest driver at this point is it's no longer a rescue mission. We know it's a recovery mission because the crew's dead. So all we're worried about is basically hooking a tow chain up to this ship and dragging it back to Starbase. If we know the Gorns are reptiles, we know they don't like cold weather. If it was me, just saying, I would have put everybody back in the shuttles. I would have, isolated anybody who we thought might have been contaminated, blow the freaking hatches on the Peregrine, turn off the heater and just let that baby get cold.
I have exactly the same point. I said, why not get the Peregrine into space and space them?
Well, and I was saying we wouldn't even have to go that far. Like I said, just turn
Freeze
off
them. Yeah.
turn off the freaking environmental controls and pop the hatches and let her sit till she's a popsicle, because you're going to have to drag her off with a tractor anyway.
Right.
Because
were we not supposed to believe that the ice storm had started outside and that they couldn't, because they had landed so far from it that they couldn't go back? I thought that was part of the story.
Well, and you would think that they would have to get the ship off the planet because Enterprise couldn't get close to the planet, if I understood. Is that not accurate?
No, I think that was accurate.
Yeah.
But if they could have, I think to LT's point, though, if they could have frozen them out and then gone back to it, it would have been safer.
Oh, yeah.
But if they didn't have the ability to leave and go back to the shuttle because of the ice storm, maybe that makes sense.
Yeah, and Spock did mention that. And that was something that Sam Kirk said is let's just go. And he said, Spock said that the storms are upon us. It would not be safe to leave the ship at this time. So...
But why not freeze out all of the parts of the ship you're not in?
Pick something that was basically contained somewhere where you can weld up all the ducts and the access ports and whatever else. And just like with, I can't think of her name. I want to call her Newt. When the girl was hiding in the cargo,
I was thinking that too.
When the girl was hiding in the cargo bay because it was cold, fine. You don't necessarily have to blow the hatches. Let's just lower the ambient temperature in the ship down and go, zip up your snazzy Starfleet jacket that I still want one of. And
Oriana is her name.
Go find somewhere to huddle around a phaser heated rock or something. I mean, I'm just saying at this point, if we know there's something that's trying to eat my crew, I'm going to fall back to the rally point, consolidate everybody together, do a head count, and take some steps to prevent my people from wandering off and getting eaten.
Yeah.
And I guess my last thing was that, again, I'm not a biologist. I don't play one on television, and I did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but I have vague problematic issues with the transmission of eggs via spit. That just kind of makes my head hurt.
And it's just gross.
Well, I mean, I could even see if we're going to say that the immature Gorn has larvae in a larvae gland, or it's like a tribble, it's born pregnant. So it's got fertilized eggs somewhere that it can, chuck onto somebody. I just was going, that's the bridge too far for me. It was kind of a cool thing from a science fiction perspective, but again, it was one of those I'm going, I just don't see that, especially if it's an immature critter actually having some sort of, again, burrowing larvae or fertilized eggs in some sort of a venom sac.
And why only use it once?
Yeah. I mean, if that was the way they were going to do it, I figured the little guys would be jumping out and, spitting on everybody.
Spraying it everywhere, yeah.
You would think. All right. One thing that bugged me is, it's one of those things that's like, maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but it appeared that the ship itself was off center, and we saw some scenes where it appeared that the ship, as we saw inside, looked off center as well, and then some where we didn't. So, like, one I can think of right off the top of my head, I think the scene where Lon meets up with Oriana, that one looked like the ship was, at an angle. But there were a bunch of them that looked like everything was, like level. So it's like, which one? Which one is it? And why does it look one way in some shots and the other way in other shots? That kind of bugged me. It was enough that I noticed it on second watch.
Right.
But not enough that I really docked the show that much.
Then when they showed the ship, it was all crashy and angular, what, a la LV 342.
Yeah.
But you're on the money where sometimes everything's flat, and you would think that if the ship is all, leany and tilty, that everything inside would be correspondingly leany and tilty.
So here, I mentioned that Lon's expertise in with the Gorn really breaks canon. But where I can add to this, since I wrote this down, is today I watched Arena, the TOS episode that we are first introduced to the Gorn. And Spock clearly doesn't know who they are. So he doesn't know, can't identify them. And, like, we don't get any kind of like, oh, the Gorn, I knew about them. There's nothing like that. So they broke canon with Spock and that. But I get why. It's not, I think they had good reason to do it. And I'm not going to be too upset about it. It's a retcon, but who cares? It's 50 something years ago. So, but you got this Lon who is supposed to be an expert, and clearly you're not supposed to have an expert. So it's that part that kind of gets me. And it seems like she knows things that she shouldn't know about them. Like that's the thing that gets me, is that as a kid, she didn't see, I don't think she saw the Gorn popping out of people and fighting over dominance, stuff like that. I don't buy that she saw all that stuff. So unless she's been doing her own research, then okay. But I don't think she's been doing her own research, because Starfleet doesn't seem to know anything about her knowledge of the Gorn,
True.
So that whole thing just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But that's more of a season-long critique that I would make versus an episode-by-episode critique.
Well, and to throw this in here for your point, Brian, if she was a kid, maybe she just saw the residue, or,
right.
She saw the DBs and didn't actually see them popping out.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Then the last thing, the red shirt trope we see again, and you liked it. And I didn't necessarily not like it, but it was so obvious to me. That's where I kind of like, oh, come on. They're obviously going to die. We've never seen these people before. They're going to die. So as soon as Pike says that they have to go down on the planet, I'm like, they're dead. Now, I didn't pick that Hammer was going to be dying, at the end of this episode, but those two I certainly expected, and especially Chia. I had to say that during this episode. Cadet Chia, she wasn't paying attention when you got Buckley making all these like wheezing noises, and clearly Chapel is like doing an exam of him,
And he was leaking jam.
yeah, he had all this stuff going on, and she's not paying attention to him. So it's like, yeah, she's not going to survive the next minute. And I was right. And then, of course, Duke was just sitting there, at the end of the Jeffries tube. It's kind of like, at the bottom of the slide, come get me,
Never put your back to somewhere that is not able to be secured.
Exactly. So anyway, it's not that the red shirts were killed. It was that they were so obvious that they were going to die. So that's what I react to there. Okay. So let's move on to our not good enough section. And this one we have 3 different sounds for.
Ooh.
So of course we have our normal one.
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough!
And of course, everyone loves Tilly.
Hello, this is Captain Tilly. What the hell? What the hell? Hold your horses.
Except for LT. And now we have another one that James, the augmented sailor, suggested, and that's this one from Memento Mori again.
That is not what I suggested.
All right. That is not what I suggested. Anyway, I think that's good. So let's get the first one here. Cam, you want to read Rick's?
Yes. Rick says, 1, hold your horses. George Kirk and this inappropriate treatment of Spock, the pointy-eared comments Bones made back in the day were rarely said in anger. That they would be made with such a negative connotation to them in this day and age does not sit well. And with George Kirk, who has been largely underutilized this season, the most we are seeing is this negativity.
Yeah, well, he was definitely negative this episode, but I don't know. He kind of is playing he's like our stand-in for today, I think. That's kind of what he's playing. So we'd be like, get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
So I get it. All right. I'm going to read Brian from Colorado this time. And just because Kim's going to be next, and, that way you don't have to, we don't do it out of order. So I'll do this one. Brian from Colorado is next. He says, not good enough. This episode killed off a major character, Hemmer. Set up the departure of another major character for at least a while, Lon, and implied that another main character is mulling over leaving too, Uhura. It looks like Uhura will probably stay and that Lon will go. What I'm wondering is what is going on behind the scenes to set up all of these big main cast changes. I kind of like the suspense it builds, but I do question why we needed this uncertainty/change with 3 main cast members all at once.
I think they did Hemmer on purpose. I think he was added to kill him.
Yes. In fact, like it was mentioned on the Ready Room that he got the part knowing that it was intentionally a 1-season role and he would die at the end. So I think it's like one of those kind of things similar to, say, Dr. Culber. Now, they were very quick to say, the producers were very quick to say in Discovery, oh, we didn't kill him off, oh, he's not gone forever or something.
Right.
Because, partially because of the outrage and, partially, I mean, who's to say maybe they did legitimately decide they wanted to bring him back. But in any case, they killed off this major character and people weren't very happy about it. I myself wasn't very happy about it. And yet they had to keep showing us snapping his neck. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many times. But anyway, with Hemmer, I think that it's unfortunate that he's going, but I am looking forward to who it could bring on in his like this might bring on the possibility of having Scotty on the show next season, or maybe it'll be some other character. I mean, there's nothing to say that it has to be Scotty, but we think that Scotty was on ship before Kirk was.
Right.
So I think it's probably going to be Scotty, but we'll see. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be like it was in season 1 of TNG, where they had like the revolving chief engineer until they finally settled on LaForge.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll see. Anyway, all right, Kim, you've got some not good enough. So why don't we go to you?
I think you mentioned this already, Brian, where you pretty much knew who was dead from the very first scene, except for Hemmer. I did mark that as a not good enough.
I did too. Yep, I did.
I thought that Pike's cavalier attitude about taking the cadets on one last mission, on this particular mission, seemed pretty dangerous and didn't seem like a great decision, even before we knew that something really bad was going to happen.
Yeah, I can see where you're going with that. And, I brought this up before, like how much of what he knows about his future affects his current decision making. Like, sure, he'll survive, but that doesn't mean everyone else will.
Exactly. Right? Yes.
So, for all he knows, he may cause something like Lorca, who, whatever his actions in Prime Lorca, caused the death of everyone on his ship,
Yep.
Something like that. So, Pike survives, everyone else dies. Except Spock and Uhura and
right. We know who has plot armor.
Right.
Exactly. There's that scene where Spock is looking down into a hole. I don't remember if it was one of the tubes or if there was a hole torn in the wall, and there's blood everywhere and he's hearing noises, and Pike taps him on the shoulder and then he jumps, and then they kind of laugh at him. Like Mbenga in particular is laughing and saying, "Oh, you're so jumpy." How would he not be jumpy? I thought that was super rude in that situation. It's not very team-like for you to come up behind him and just tap him on the shoulder without saying something. So I didn't think that was very good leadership behavior in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say the reality of it is I would say that I've been in 2 professions where, dark humor is our stock and trade, because without dark humor, we don't maintain our sanity very well. So I see what you're saying. Absolutely. But the reality of it is that, maybe.
Yeah. Especially when there's blood everywhere. I just think, what if he turned around and shot at you? It just didn't seem wise. I think that the Gorn now, I mean, I made a joke earlier of, has there been an episode without the Gorn? Because they've been in a lot of them or mentioned in a lot of them. But I think now they're too strong. And, you can't detect them with sensors. They're highly intelligent, even hours after they're born. They have a barrier to telepathy. It's like they've just gone a little bit too far and made a monster that can't be killed or can't be defeated. And it just feels like that's just not quite good enough.
Not good enough?
Not good enough. Yeah. Because it's too good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like one step too far with the invulnerable alien.
I get it. I definitely get what you mean there. It's almost like the Borg, where they made the Borg too invincible that they had to like bring back the Borg a little bit to make them more, I don't know, defeatable.
Well, but the good news is that this is still fairly early on, and just like when they first came out, stealth fighters couldn't be seen on radar, but now they've come up with ways to see stealth fighters on radar. So maybe the fact that hopefully they got some biological samples, they can work their magic and retune their scanners. And I mean, but I'm absolutely on board with you. It's bad when you have the super invincible, can't figure out a way to kill them enemies.
Yeah, it's like the superhero movies. They have to keep escalating the bad guys to the point that they're universe killers.
Well, it's why I've always argued that how much plot development can you have with Superman?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And the only way you can defeat him is, with something like kryptonite, or there were a couple of ways, wasn't there?
One super rare element from his home planet that's in very short supply that they came up with so they'd have something to imperil him.
That somehow turns up all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then my last maybe super whiny, not good enough is the character of Mbenga. I don't like him. I don't know. I cannot relate to this character. I don't think he's written well. I don't think he's acted well. And in every episode, and James will back me up, I complain about him in every single episode. And I complained about him in this episode, but that's just maybe me being whiny, but I do not like that character.
Why?
All the stuff that they did with his daughter, I thought was very weak. And the acting in the episode where he lost his daughter, I thought that, again, I didn't think it was acted very well. So I just don't believe that they've developed him appropriately. And I'm not feeling that character yet.
Gotcha.
I hope that they find a way to make him a little bit more well-rounded, but he's not fully fleshed out, I guess, is the problem.
Yeah, well, and he was basically a blank slate. Even though the character existed in TOS, very little was known about him. Less than Chapel. So yeah, I can see where you're going there. All right, LT, what have you got?
Well, I started off my not good enough by saying that ever since Discovery came out, in every subsequent episode or every subsequent series, they've been really hard on engineers. I mean, think about it. We've gone through how many seasons of Discovery, and we still really don't know who the chief engineer is.
Well, we keep hoping it's Jet Reno, but
but nobody has ever said they're the chief engineer. We have a few randos being engineers.
We had a graphic in season 1 that showed Stamets as chief engineer, and the showrunners quickly came on and said, no, he's not chief engineer. So it's like, well, which is it? And if that was so important, why didn't you fix it? But anyway.
Well, I'm just saying.
I will bring up one example of a chief engineer that has fared okay, and that would be Andy Billups.
Well, Andy is our hero.
All right. LT, where were you?
I was trying to opine on the fact that post-disco Star Trek is loath to name chief engineers other than our hero, Andy Billups.
A stone cold badass, as Rutherford would say.
Correct.
And he's pretty much the only official chief engineer that we know of now that Hemmer's not with us anymore.
Yeah.
Picard, doesn't lend itself to having engineers. So,
well, you could argue that when they were on La Sirena, they had the they had the hologram engineer.
That's true. Yeah.
And by virtue of his post being the only engineer, he can make himself chief.
Very true.
Chief as in not in command, but chief as in only. Well, to drive on with my not good enoughs, I kind of had an issue with just letting Lon go. I'm sorry, if you're assigned to a ship and you've got a job and you need to time off to go on this, emotional vision quest or whatever she's going to go do, there's paperwork. It's not like you can just go, okay, go do what you've got to do and come back when you can. And again, perhaps my years of working in various governmental capacities have sort of jaded my opinion of that. And even in the broader corporate world, I just don't think you can just say, just take some time off and we'll catch up later. Again, maybe it's just me. Since we've talked about him probably more this episode than we've talked about him in any other appearance of his, as much as I enjoyed when Sam Kirk was doing the Hudson, I'm kind of going, get a grip on yourself, man. This is, you're on an away mission in a critical situation, save that crap for later. Or, as I've stated previously in the podcast, perhaps is Sam the emo Kirk brother? Is he the one that always went, but Dad, I don't want to go to the birthday party. It's not my thing. Just to the point where nobody, they sort of did. Pike sort of did reel him back in, but it's kind of where you want to just, take him by the shoulders and just kind of give him the stare and say, get your shit together. We're be on point. We've got a mission. Let's go. We can talk about this later. And if the term not very Starfleet, I'm just saying it's not very teamy at this point. And I guess my final not good enough was, okay, maybe they didn't know that it was going to turn into such a crap mission. But the fact that they're going, hey, let's take the kids on one more mission out from the ship before they go away. I'm like, yeah, they're dead. If he'd have just picked some other, no-name crewman and said, okay, you're going and you're going. But the fact they made such a big deal, they had their little party and they're going, oh, well, you're cadets. It's the end of your thing and you're going to be leaving us, but we're going to take you out on one more away mission, one more landing party. And I'm going, this is going to be bad. And I understand Duke got promoted, but he's still green enough that there's not a whole lot of real estate between Ensign and Lieutenant JG. So I was just going, yeah, I kind of saw that coming.
That's like we were, talking about before.
Yeah. And
you have a Lieutenant JG and a cadet averages out to an ensign.
And I understand that there are people there, we had some comments that felt more strongly about it than I did, but I was just going, I think it's just a little weak. Wasn't going to take a full no on it, but I just kind of said, you can do better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, some people have commented about this, but I think Kim, you said something about it. Like, it's almost like Pike's a little cavalier when it comes to some of these, and I do have to wonder, is this the same, prior to going to Boreth and learning about his fate, is this the decision he would have made before that? Like, if that never happened, would he be making the same choice, or would he be sending number one down there, or would he be picking some other way of determining it? I don't know. Like, I don't know what the answer is, to be honest, but I would say very possibly that he would have made different choices. But like I said, there's no way we can know for sure. For me, like a lot of people have said, I think there's an opportunity there, losing Hemmer so early on the show. Like, I could have seen him staying at least another season, like assuming that he was there for a specific purpose and, wasn't going to survive. It would have been nice to see more of him, but it does give the chance for them to introduce Scotty and, and there's also other characters that can be introduced as well. Like Sulu could be introduced as well, not as an engineer, but, so there are some possibilities, some things that could come into play.
Wasn't it in Mantrap that Sulu was in Astrometrics, I think?
No, it was Where No
Man Has Gone Before.
Where No Man Has Gone
Before. I knew it was
Before.
one of the two of those.
Yeah, it was astrometrics or mathematics or something. But originally he was a botanist. That's what he was originally, known to be. So, and we have some kind of references to that with Stamets kind of hinting that he knows Sulu a couple times. I already brought up the point about, why just not get the Peregrine into space and space everybody, like just space the Gorn, and that should have been the objective. But your point about, why not just chill them out? I can see that as well. I think if you give the Gorn no place to hide, well, they may either find one or make one that's hot enough for them. But the Mabenga, it's like I forget how it was worded, but he referred to Oriana as my daughter, and then corrected himself to my patient. I thought that was a good reference to the previous episode, but I also didn't completely buy that he would say that. It seemed like a bit of a stretch to me.
Yeah, I think if they'd have done this episode before they did, well, no, they couldn't have. But if they didn't kill Hammer and they'd have done this before, I want to say Elysian Forest, but it's Elysian Kingdom, I think. But if they'd have done it opposite, then I could see where he was still traumatized about his daughter. But she had her happy ending. She's gone off with the sentient nebula now. He shouldn't be all screwed up about his daughter now.
He shouldn't be.
Well, wait a minute. He missed her whole life, whether or not she's still alive. I don't think in one episode or two episodes he would get over it. I agree that it seemed like maybe he should have spent a little bit more time with this girl before he accidentally called her his daughter. He had no connection with her as far as we could tell.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm not sure I buy that he should be over it. You guys are harsh.
Comes with the territory.
Oh, yeah. All right.
I didn't...
And I'm the one who doesn't like that character.
I didn't think that he should be over it. I just thought that it was kind of a stretch for him to call her my daughter, given the fact that he had really not spent much time with her. So, it was difficult for him to have any kind of bond with her,
right?
To think that way,
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was.
No, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
And my last point, the Sombra class, they clearly did this to save money. And I get some of that, it made it so they didn't have to build a bunch of new sets and all of that. And, really, why would they need to? But, and they did redress the bridge. The bridge was different color. So it was that. But they said it was built from the parts of a Constitution class, right? And they said it was fast. And they also said that it had a complement of 99. So, okay, it pretty much looks like a Constitution class. So my question there is, why did it have to look so much like a Constitution class? When in the past, let's take, for example, the Miranda class, the class that we see Khan using in Star Trek II, the Wrath of Khan. We see it first there, but then we see them forever, and we see different classes of ships that are based on the Miranda, but aren't the Miranda. And okay, the Sombra class is based on the Constitution class, but it didn't look any different. So why couldn't they make it look a little different? Like either, I don't know, make the saucer a little smaller, or like they did with the Miranda and the Soyuz class, like make the extensions different, or so it looks a little different. It just didn't look any different. Like, how would you determine a Sombra class versus a Constitution class if you're an enemy of the Federation. Like, do you look at how can you tell the difference between the two? That's what I'm asking. It's like, and to this, I will say, the Trek Yards guys, the guys that they just eat this kind of stuff up. They analyze ships on Star Trek like you wouldn't believe. Even they looked at this and they couldn't tell the Sombra versus the Constitution class apart. They did like this 20-something minute side by side, and you couldn't tell them apart. So that's my point. Why not make them a little bit different so that you can tell the difference? Okay, that's it.
And I disagree.
I know. That's why
I disagree. And I would say when I did the side by side and looked at it, I saw differences. To me, it looked like the saucer section is thinner.
Okay.
And the secondary hull is thinner, and the secondary hull is not as rounded. It looks like it's more of a straight cylinder rather than the Constitution class, which sort of bulges in the center.
Well, okay. To me, that's a better answer than I was expecting you to say. That's so if you're determining that they do look different, I'm happy with that. You may have seen something that I didn't see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, if you look at, and this would be where having James the Augmented Sailor would start ranting at me. But if you took an Arleigh Burke destroyer and put it next to a Oliver Hazard Perry frigate, and you put them side by side, you could make the argument, well, they look the same because they're both, lighter ships, and there might be some small differences in the superstructure, and, there might be some differences in the hull shape, but you could also make the argument that they look pretty similar. And I've looked at my stacks and stacks of Starfleet ship books, and that at one of the books or another had a light cruiser that was still basically shaped like what you'd expect a Constitution class ship to be shaped like. It still had twin nacelles, a secondary hull, and a saucer section. While I agree with you that they could have gone with a lighter class ship to be something like a Miranda or a Soyuz, basically a disc with two nacelles, it'd be like saying you could tell the difference between what was it, the Yosemite class runabout and the Rio Grande class runabout, that one of them had a roll cage and the other one didn't.
Yeah.
So you can say, well, they look the same. Well, they look different. They've got different hull features. So I could see that there is a similarity, but, I saw a difference. And if, somebody wants to take me to task for that, that's groovy. But
no, I'm happy that you saw a difference because I didn't see one. But I'm happy you did. So, and because I would rather there be a difference than there not be a difference.
Well, it's the argument you could make where on a macro level, an Excelsior and an Enterprise both have a primary hull, a secondary hull, and two nacelles. But the Excelsior, as someone said, called it a pregnant guppy. I think that was one of the comments I heard at one point. It is radically shaped different. But just like I said, cruising through some of my books, there were essentially lighter cruisers that were still very close to a Connie's plan form.
Yeah, and I know in Star Trek Online, like there are, in fact, in Picard, they had them variants to, say, the Galaxy class.
Mm-hmm.
There were ships that looked very similar to a Galaxy class that weren't a Galaxy class. So there is precedent for it. Anyway, that was my take.
Okay. And I said my 2 cents on it. So there we go.
But I appreciate the fact that you actually saw a difference, because I like the fact that you saw a difference.
And I mean, just for argument's sake, we went through this with season 1 of Picard, where they said, they used 50 of the same ship. I was kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt on one hand, but modifying the wireframe wouldn't be horrifically hard. So,
all right. So that's it for our not good enoughs. So let's move on to our feedback section and open hailing frequencies for the second time. All right. So we've got a voicemail from our good friend, Jeff X-Force 11.
Well, hello, Star Trek fans. It's Jeff X-Force 11 leaving my thoughts about Strange New Worlds, All Who Wander. This was an excellent episode. I loved the personal dynamics in this episode. It was action-packed, it was intense, and it showed each person's interactions with fear and stress. And I just really love this crew. And if I could have breakfast with the senior officers in Pike's quarters on a regular basis, you can sign me up for Starfleet. But I really enjoyed this episode. I love this series, and I cannot wait to see what they do next. All right, those are my thoughts. X-Force is out.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, X-Force 11, for your feedback voicemail again. Keeping the streak alive, I believe now we are at 5.
Yep.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So, yeah, you had a similar kind of reaction than I did to the breakfast stuff. Yeah. Okay. I think that's it for, unless anybody's got anything else to say about Jeff's voicemail.
Nope.
We've got one bit of feedback. We haven't heard much from Wes this week, but all of his feedback actually fit into the feedback section. So I'm going to read it. He says, I did get access to this early, but did not watch it fully. I decided to wait until everyone got it. I did like the episode, but I'm not sure if I fully like it. I'm not so sure if I am digging the Predator and Alien vibes. Someone may be getting a call from the creators of both franchises, LOL. But darn it all, they killed Hemmer. After watching it, I declare Hemmer the Kenny of Strange New Worlds. Oh my God, they killed Hemmer. You bastards. That's funny.
Yep.
Only if they're going to keep
they'd have to
killing
bring
him.
him back and kill him again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which actually would be quite funny if he just appeared in the next episode like nothing happened.
Yeah.
True episodic television. He's still here.
Yeah. Reminds me of
Shax.
with Shax. Okay. Well, that's it for our feedback section. Not much in the feedback section this week. Let's go to our notes. Kim, what do you have?
One of the things that's been bothering me this season about many of the episodes is I feel like I've seen it before. It seems like maybe it's because there's so many callbacks to the original series episodes and older episodes, but I keep feeling like, this has already happened. And this might have been the first episode where I didn't really feel that way. And I think that's why I enjoyed it so much. But all of the other series have these, there's something terrible on the ship type episodes. So even this has been done before. Maybe the effects now are to the point where it felt enough different. But I've definitely been struggling to connect to the show. I haven't loved it as much as I had thought I would. And part of the challenge for me has been I loved Pike so much on Discovery, and I don't love him here. And I'm not sure why. I'm starting to think it's because his character is so quiet. I mean, even when he's giving his speeches, he's giving these speeches really quietly. And I'm not feeling the big leadership from the captains that I usually enjoy. So I don't know. I'm not able to completely articulate the challenge that I'm having, but that's those have kind of been my problems as I get through this season. And as I watch it with my husband, James, he loves it. I'm sure he's given every episode a 10 if he's writing down a score. You know, he loves every one of them, and I want to love it, but it just hasn't been my favorite show.
I don't think you have to apologize for that. Because,
Well, I feel bad going on a podcast and saying, because I like to be usually pretty positive about stuff.
You were pretty positive. I mean, you gave this episode the highest mark that you gave it. And I think the last time you were on, it was a pretty high mark. So
those were my 2 favorite episodes of the season. Is the Ghosts of Illyria and this one. And I think it was just an accident that those were the ones that I came on for. But a lot of the other ones, we've gotten to the end and I've just gone, meh. And I don't know. I want to love it more. And I hope that I connect with it more, as it goes on. Although we've only got 1 more episode left this season.
I don't know, Kim. I'm rather enjoying the juxtaposition because normally, I'm the critic. Brian is the fanboy, and then we have the other voice that's usually the moderate. And so now it's like I can be the fanboy. It's just
Great.
really it's odd for me to be out of my curmudgeon chair.
Well, and I've had a couple of times where I've been a curmudgeon, like I mentioned the Spock Amok episode, where I really felt like my rating was lower than it could have been or should have been. And, a lot, like the first, 6 episodes, well, not 6, I guess it was 3, 4, 5, and 6 were done during this time where I could only see the shows on a phone. So my enjoyment of them was affected by it, as you might expect, but I could look past it, especially Memento Mori. That was one where it's like, oh, screw it. I'm going to watch it on my computer screen because I just had to watch that on a bigger screen than my phone. Anyway.
And Memento Mori, to me, felt so much like, I think I have the right episode. It felt so much like the ship on Deep Space Nine, which was an episode that we had just watched. And that impacted my enjoyment of it because I thought, again, I've seen this. I just watched this.
Okay. I can go with that.
Those are my notes. Those are my whiny notes.
Your whiny notes. All right, LT, what about you?
Well, I'm going to put on my biologist hat and start off by saying the Gorn life cycle, as I have sort of sussed it out in my head, reminds me of the Tharks from Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars series, and especially as we saw the Tharks in the movie. So let me explain what I am positing here. We know that on the adult end, the Gorns are able to build starships, pilot starships, and do advanced sort of things. We also know at the juvenile stage that they're basically angry little carnivorous critters and don't necessarily show a developed intelligence as far as beyond cunning and hunting and that sort of thing. So what I have thought about and what I am figuring is thusly that the baby Gorns, however they are produced, that we know the adults were capturing other species and introducing the larvae, if you will, into the host so that they develop and come out into what I'm going to call a nymph stage. So that in this nymphal stage, that's when you have the little, skrittering critters that are running around eating things. And we know that potentially they are fighting amongst themselves for dominance. But what I would posit is as they get older and you have this winnowing effect of only the smartest and strongest survive, that at some point in their gestational cycle, they're going to develop enough of an intelligence that they begin, operating collectively. Since you brought up Jurassic Park, much as you saw the velociraptors working together as a pack, my thought process is at some point when they get older that the smarter, stronger survivors start working together as a pack, hive, cluster, whatever sort of unit name you want to give them, so that at some point when they are juveniles and they have grown up a bit, that as their intelligence develops at some point, the adults can come in and then take them off to, I don't know, their Gorn Spartan training camp, to where they learn to communicate and learn to work in a, dare I say, civilization, but work as a species-based group. And then they will stay in school and learn and become the adults that we see driving starships and running about in the cosmos. And back to my original point is that that's sort of what you saw with the Tharks in the John Carter movie, is that basically the eggs were in sort of like a greenhouse gestational room. And once they hatched out and started being, alive and independent, that they would start fighting amongst themselves, and eventually they would be bonded off with an adult who would start teaching them and training them at some point until they became old enough to join the greater society. And I realize this is all in my head. This is all just my theory. But if you will at least humor me in the point, it does make sense, and at least gives us a mechanism to go from the one extreme at one end to the other end, which we saw in Memento Mori.
Right.
Yeah, La'an kept saying how intelligent they were, but you're right. You would think they would evolve at some point into learning to work together because you would be stronger.
Well, and you would have to, because if it was just a matter of everybody's fighting amongst themselves all the time, you'd never establish enough of a societal group that you could get anything done.
Right.
Because
you're right.
That's a good point.
Because you still have to have a diverse skill set in order to build a ship, let alone a starship. So that's just came to me in the middle of the night and started thinking about it and said, well, it's something, they haven't explored, but it sort of gives me a headcanon explanation of how you get from, jumping out of Buckley's back and eating Duke in the Jeffries tube to flying about in starships.
All right. Well, one thing I just put on our show doc was something that I had seen today on Twitter from a gentleman by the name of Timothy Peel. And I believe he is a graphic artist that works on Strange New Worlds and other shows, but Strange New Worlds is the one that we care about right now. And it is I think we see this on a wall on the Enterprise, and it is we see one screen that shows the USS Peregrine, which is NCC 1549, and there's some stuff about the actual ship itself. I believe it says number of decks 22 on there, which I'm not sure how many decks the Enterprise has. I'd have to look. But you're probably right, LT, that there is a slight difference in them. And then I would like, someone from the show to kind of comment on it like they did with Picard and say, hey, look, we had 31 ships in this armada, and here they are, and this is the number of classes and all of that. That was really cool when they did that.
Right.
So anyways, NCC 1549. And that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say, and I kind of hinted at this before, I saw a parallel between the way Sam Kirk was talking to Spock in this episode versus the way that James T. Kirk talks to Spock in the 2009 movie. It's for a different effect, but he says a lot of the same things. So the first clip I'm going to play is from the 2009 Star Trek movie, and it is when Kirk is trying to prove that Spock is emotionally compromised.
What is it with you, Spock? Your planet was just destroyed, your mother murdered, and you're not even upset.
If you are presuming that these experiences in any way impede my ability to command this ship, you are mistaken.
And yet you were the one who said fear was necessary for command. Did you see his ship? Do you see what he did?
Yes, of course I did.
So are you afraid or aren't you?
I will not allow you to lecture me about the merits of emotion.
Then why don't you stop me?
Step away from me, Mr.
What is it like not to feel anger or heartbreak or the need to stop at nothing to avenge the death of the woman who gave birth to you?
Back away from
You feel nothing. It must not even compute for you. You never loved her.
And Kirk is a punching bag, which he was a punching bag several times in that particular movie. All right, so now we're going to play Sam Kirk and Spock's exchange on the Peregrine.
Impressive. Like their genetic coding. No doubt another evolution in order to hunt undetected.
Impressive. You think this is impressive?
It was merely an observation.
He killed Duke right in front of you. Spock, doesn't that hit you somewhere deep inside? No, nothing.
We just need to reboot navigation.
Can you feel anything? Or are you some heartless, pointy-eared computer?
Hey! Now that that's out of the way, if we want to get out alive, we have to stop yelling at each other and start listening.
Now, he doesn't say, you never loved her. But I personally found that there were some similarities with those two conversations. If you listen to the things that he says, Sam Kirk, he hits similar notes about like Spock not being able to feel, right? So that's kind of where I was going with that. Anyway, so let's move on to our spot the references. And one thing that made me pause was the title. So I couldn't figure out where the title came from. And it was from Tolkien, and it is based on a poem was written by Bilbo Baggins to describe Aragorn, used by him to help convince Frodo and company to trust him in his guise as Strider. Gandalf included the poem in his letter to Frodo, which he left at the Prancing Pony for Barlaam Butterbur to deliver. And that's in the Fellowship of the Ring, you said?
Mm-hmm.
So the poem reads, all that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes, a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. So that's the whole poem. But anyway, so the other thing I have is Deep Space Station K7 is where they're going for the, I forget what kind of power thing that was that they were delivering. But that is, of course, the site for TOS Season 2, Episode 15, the famous episode, The Trouble with Tribbles. And, of course, Deep Space Nine's Season 5, Episode 6, Trials and Tribulations. So beyond that, I don't know if I have any more references. So I looked, but I didn't really find anything. There probably are some. Maybe I'll have more next week. But all right, so let's move on to our news section and play our shipwide announcements. All right, so it's time for Wes and the news.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wes Hinton, one of the two co-hosts of the Twin Cities Trekkies podcast, and this is your shipwide announcements for this week. This week's episode of The Ready Room had Bruce Horak, who played Hemmer, who took on quite a prominent role in this episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. The highlights of the interview with Wil Wheaton included that he was known to have a heads up that Hemmer would only be in this season of Strange New Worlds. This is similar to when Jason Isaacs took on the role of Gabriel Lorca for the first season of Star Trek Discovery. He knew ahead of time that his character would not survive the season, which is similar to what Bruce Horak had done. There was also a featurette on the Gorn and how they were reintroduced into Star Trek via Strange New Worlds. There was also a featurette on the times the Star Trek franchise delved into downright horror. An example could be seen in the Next Generation episode Night Terrors. And finally, there was a sneak peek at the season finale entitled A Quality of Mercy. Next week, Wil Wheaton will be in Toronto to do this episode of The Ready Room, and will be having Henry Alonzo Myers as one of his guests. Here's what's making news this week in the Star Trek universe for all you Talk Through Media Star Trek podcast listeners. We have sadly lost two more members of the Star Trek family. The first is Star Trek model maker Greg Gine. His death was actually in May, but then was reported over a month later by his friend and colleague, former Star Trek illustrator Rick Sternbach, which was then shared by several other people who were involved in the behind-the-scenes work with the franchise, such as Mike and Denise Okuda. Gine was a model maker with the Star Trek franchise for almost 3 decades. He was subcontracted in 1977 when Magicam hired him to work on the Klingon D7 class cruiser for the aborted Star Trek Phase 2 television series. While this version was ultimately not used, he was hired to do several miniatures for Star Trek The Motion Picture. He would help to create several well-known miniatures, such as the 4-foot and 6-foot shooting models of the Enterprise D for Star Trek The Next Generation. He was nominated for an Emmy Award in 1997 for his work on the Deep Space Nine episode Trials and Tribulations. Outside of Star Trek, he was known for his work on Close Encounters of the Third Kind and 1941, which earned him an Academy Award nomination for each of those films. One of his recent credits was working on the 2014 Christopher Nolan epic Interstellar. And the second death is Star Trek Enterprise guest actress Mary Mara, who passed away at the age of 61. According to a police report published on June 27th, Mara was discovered in the St. Lawrence River in Cape Vincent, New York, around 8:10 the previous night by various officers of the New York State Police. According to a statement from a representative, Mara was staying at the summer home of her sister Martha. A preliminary investigation suggested that Mara had died by drowning while swimming. Mara had guest starred as the unnamed sphere builder Presage in the final 3 episodes of Star Trek Enterprise's 3rd season, which are The Council, Countdown, and 0 Hour. Mara was a prolific actress. She appeared in recurring roles in ER and Law & Order before landing a starring role in 1996, playing Inspector Bryn Carson in the first 2 seasons of the CBS police procedural Nash Bridges. Mara most recently had 2 guest starring roles on television, both in 2014, on the ABC soap opera General Hospital and the CBS crime drama Criminal Minds. Star Trek Strange New Worlds may be ending its first season next week, but as of today, July 1st, they have wrapped on Season 2. It promises to be a better season than Season 1, says Erica Ortega's actress Melissa Navia. It is also rumored, which was then picked up by Esquire and said by Babs Alusa-Mukun, that the Klingons may be making a return to live action in the 23rd century for the first time since April of 2019, when they last appeared in the Star Trek Discovery episode Such Sweet Sorrow Part 2. It is unclear whether or not how the Klingons will be looked or who will be appearing as Klingons in Season 2. And finally, Nickelodeon announced that Star Trek Prodigy will be making its U.S. debut on Nickelodeon next Friday, July 8th, almost a full 9 months after it debuted on Paramount+. The other 8 episodes, which comprise the first half of the season, will then air in successive weeks, ending August 5th. This is potentially why we have not heard anything for New Star Trek after the Season 1 finale of Star Trek Strange New Worlds on Paramount+. Twin Cities Trekkies is a weekly podcast dedicated to everything Star Trek. My podcast co-host Mackenzie Flickinger and I talk about everything from the original series all the way through Star Trek Strange New Worlds and everything in between. New episodes are released every Wednesday. You can find Twin Cities Trekkies on every platform you can think of for podcasts. Our social media handles is TC Trekkies Pod for both Facebook and Instagram. You can also reach us by emailing us at tctrekkiespodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave us voice messages when you find the podcast at anchor.fm/Twin Cities Trekkies.
All right. Thanks, Wes, for your news this week. So, Kim, I'm curious what you think about this Nickelodeon news. We knew that this was something that was coming. I honestly, I thought it had already aired on Nickelodeon. So, but I guess that was just a sneak peek or something.
Yeah, I think they aired the first 2 episodes. And so, yeah, now they're, I guess, releasing all of them. I think it makes sense. And I do think we had heard that that was the plan, that eventually it would get to Nickelodeon. That certainly should help it get a broader audience, I would think. Maybe that's going to be the plan from now on, that they'll eventually air the episodes.
Yeah.
But first they'll be on Paramount+.
Yeah, and I'm curious what that's going to mean for your podcast, whether or not there's, you'll see a spike in listeners, or,
Yeah, it could be.
You'll suddenly get in a bunch of feedback.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Maybe we have to re-release the episodes as the show airs on Nickelodeon.
I don't know. You might consider it, but I mean, it all depends on whether or not you start getting, suddenly more people listening to you.
Yeah, I won't be surprised at all if the numbers start to go up once it hits Nickelodeon. And if we do start to get feedback, we can record little shorts that we could add in. No problem.
Or you could do a feedback episode or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, we do that with Rebinge DS9.
Cool. All right. We have some Parrot Analytics this week. In fact, let's see. Stranger Things, this is as of 25th of June to the 1st of July. Stranger Things was again at the number 1 position at 174 times the demand of an average show, which of course puts that way into the exceptional range. It got as high as 212. The Boys at number 2 with 56.5 times the demand of an average show. Brand new in the number 3 spot is The Umbrella Academy. Went to number 3 at 54.5 times. And I think that's up from number 5 last week. Yeah. So just up 2 notches. The Mandalorian at 37.2. Obi-Wan Kenobi at 34.1. And then in number 6 position was Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which it has been in the number 6 position at least the last 3 weeks, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it got a 33 times the demand of an average show. So it is in the exceptional range, which is good to see. And it was last week at 33.7, but the week before was at 31.4. So, yeah, that's where we're at.
And while the numbers have varied, it's pretty well stayed in that number 6 spot.
Yeah, it's been, at one point it was as high as number 3, and it's been, at number 4, number 5, number 6. It hasn't dropped under number 6. So, that's pretty good. I wouldn't be surprised if the next 2 weeks it goes up before it starts coming down. Because these usually lag 1 week. So we should get a little bit of a bump for the one we're covering this week. And then for the finale, it'll probably go up again. Yeah, so I think that's good. And, the show has been consistent pretty much all the way through. And, I mean, you've had some issues bonding with it, Kim, but quality, where would you say this show fits in the shows that we've seen?
Quality in terms of what?
Quality in terms of, like looking at it show by show, I guess. Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, Strange New Worlds, Prodigy. Where do you think it fits? I mean, and Discovery's had 4 seasons. Picard's had 2. Strange New Worlds Lower Decks has had 2. The other 2 have only had 1.
That's tough for me. I've been a huge fan of Discovery. I thought season 4 was a bust, but the first 3 seasons were really good and something I really liked. I'd probably rank that first of the ones that you listed. And then I've also really enjoyed Picard, but I don't think they've been able to stick the landing in either of the first 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So I think what comes second is maybe tough for me to pick. I might pick Prodigy at this point because I have really been enjoying Prodigy. And then after that, I think they're all kind of the same. I think just in terms of look, the quality is high. It's hard to argue with the effects, and everything is quite beautiful and shiny and new. I don't always like the way that the Enterprise bridge looks on Strange New Worlds, but I wouldn't to say that's a ding for the quality of the show. I think all of them are high quality shows.
Did you like the Peregrine bridge versus the Enterprise bridge because it was a little more muted?
A little more muted in colors. It didn't look like that Coca-Cola vending machine that we talked about the last time I was here.
I remember.
Yeah, I think I probably liked it a little bit more, although it was kind of beat up, so it was hard to tell.
Yeah, the question that we've got at this point is, will it stick the landing? I have every reason to believe that it will.
Yeah.
Partially because of the nature of the show, and just partially, based on the first 9 that we've seen. I think that we're going to get a very satisfying episode 10, and we'll be kind of anxiously awaiting season 2, which just wrapped up.
Yeah.
So the shooting. So that's where I'm at. What about you, LT?
Well, I mean, I've not made any bones about it that I think that, as a whole and individually as episodes, I think that they've, gotten their beard. I think that they have gotten their feet underneath them. That of the shows, I think that this first season of Strange New Worlds is nominally better than season 2 of Discovery, which I thought has been the best of the 4. I've had the same feelings with Picard, that I think season 2 was better than season 1, but I still agree that they have trouble wrapping it up and sticking the landing at the end. I absolutely love Lower Decks, but I can't put Lower Decks in the same box, not because it's animated, but because it's animated. I'm not taking off for the fact that it's an animated show, but again, I have to go with Strange New Worlds only because it's live action. My innate biases will have to prefer, even minimally, live action versus animation. That I'm still going to go with. This is what I wish they could have done from the beginning. The beginning meaning season 1 of Discovery.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, I totally disagree with that, but I don't think that's a surprise.
No.
I think they're very different shows,
well, they
right?
are.
Being episodic and serialized. And I thought that when Discovery started, I thought the serialization would bother me and that ultimately I would want to go back to episodic. But turns out I was wrong. I actually now found myself liking the serialization of Discovery more, but they have to do a better job with the seasons.
Well, and I don't have a problem either way. That it wasn't the serialization part of the story that got me. It's the fact that the first 4 episodes were just a grind. That I've had.
I see what you're saying.
I've had friends of mine who've started watching Discovery, and they get through the Vulcan Hello, and they're like, I can't watch this. And I've said, you've got to get through the first 4. The first 4 are just exposition, setting everything up. Once you get past the first 4, it gets better.
I love the first 4 episodes.
Okay. They're just
I'm sorry you didn't like them.
I
really
didn't say I didn't like them. I just said they were a grind to watch.
Okay.
The first 4 episodes of what?
Discovery season 1.
Discovery.
Oh, for me, it was the first 2. And it was how different they were, and just, especially with it ending on the lead character, being sentenced to life imprisonment for
mutiny.
It's like, where do you go from there?
Well, and I've said the same thing about, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that I like the series as a whole, but the first, 2 or 3 episodes of it were kind of a grind to get through, only because of the cadence of what the show was doing. And the only reason I go in 4 for Discovery is because the lack of inertia of the first 2, to me, influenced the next 2. But after you got through the first 4, then things picked up and things worked because you had gotten through the first 4.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was the first 2, and then it started getting interesting with episode 3. So, but anyway, that's Discovery. And with that, I have to say,
you're going to do it.
I'm going to do it. All right.
What is this bizarre segue that's happening right now? Can we maybe stay on point?
I don't know, Brian. I feel like you asked the question.
I know.
LT, and I followed you off the
I know.
off the road.
Well, I can make segues that, make us fall off a cliff.
This wasn't going off the road. This was the locomotive went and pulled the rest of the train with it.
There you go. All right. So, if you have some things that you want to say for next week, submitting your theories and feedback, go to talkthroughmedia.com/feedback, where you can submit text or audio. Call 216-232-6146 and leave a voicemail. You can email us at strangenewworlds@talkthroughmedia.com. You can post in our designated episode thread in our Facebook group. That's at facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts with an S at the end. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Star Trek TTM.
If you'd like to support the podcast, you can like our page on Facebook. That's facebook.com/talkthroughmedia. And while you're there, write a review. You can share us on Facebook and retweet us on Twitter, especially when we post that a new episode is out. You can subscribe to the Talk Through Media YouTube channel, which is where you'll find our newest episodes first. You can subscribe to us in Apple Podcast or the podcast client of your choice. And while you're there, give us a rating or a review. You can go to podchaser.com, where you can rate and review the podcast and even individual episodes. Finally, the best way to help us keep the lights on is to support us via our Patreon. We'd like to thank our Patreon supporters: Andrew Davis, Morning Pace, Trey, Mike, Robert Kaiser, Jeff Gentry, Kevin Lyle, Michael Carrier, Aaron Mays, Jeff Biacco, Brian Shiro, Kim Vogley, Kyle McAdams, James Robbins, and me.
And you.
And me.
And Kim. All of the podcasts from Talk Through Media can be found on the Talk Through Media all-inclusive feed, which includes Kim's Rebinge DS9, what episode are you up to now?
We just released season 5, episode 11, and we just finished recording 15 or 16, whichever one is Dr. Bashir, I presume.
Ah, that's an interesting one.
That's an interesting episode.
Yeah. Yes. So, and the Star Trek Prodigy on Rebinge It is the other podcast that you do for the network. Thank you very much.
You bet.
You may be getting us on the Star Trek Discovery podcast feed or the Star Trek Picard cast feed or the Star Trek Strange New Worlds talk through feed, or as I mentioned, the Talk Through Media all-inclusive feed. And the other thing on the all-inclusive feed is the Walking Dead talk through. And the Walking Dead talk through is, of course, LT, Kyle, and me. And that has been on a hiatus for the last month or so.
Yep.
We believe it will be coming back in the next, I would say, month. But we might do a special episode coming soon if we can just arrange it to prepare us for, I don't know, the last 8 of The Walking Dead and any, stuff on the anthology show.
Yes, get us ready for Tales.
Yes. So on the last episode of the season for Star Trek Strange New Worlds Talk Through, we will be covering Season 1, Episode 10, A Quality of Mercy. That is written by the showrunners Henry Alonso Myers and Akiva Goldsman and directed by Chris Fisher. We don't have a description yet. We believe from the preview we're going to see Admiral April again, aren't we? I think he was in the preview, I want to say.
I did not watch the preview.
Okay.
I don't like spoilers.
I watched the preview, but I didn't notice. I was too shocked by the other thing in the preview.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Don't tell me.
No, I will not tell you.
I won't tell you.
Thank you.
So until next time, I'm Brian.
And I'm LT.
And I'm Kim.
Peace and long life.
Live long and prosper.
Hit it.